That's spiritual affective disorder. Now, what I found kind of interesting as I was reading more about this, how many of you are Kathleen Norris fans? She wrote Cloister Walk and Dakota, a number of books. A number of you read Kathleen Norris. She has a book, came out about 2 years ago, called Affective. And what it's about is the fact that as far back as the 4th century in the church, people were struggling with spiritual affective disorder, and the people struggling with it were the people you would least likely expect that. It was the monks and the nuns living in faith communities. And they didn't call it spiritual affective disorder, they called it Affective. Early Christian writings, they describe it as a state of restlessness and the inability to either work or pray. You know what that feels like? Some of us do. Thomas Aquinas describes it. He says it's a flight from the world which leads to not even caring that we don't care. And one of the most wonderful descriptions comes from a 4th century monk named Evagrius, and he says, the demon of acedia, also called the noonday demon, is the one that causes spiritually inclined people the most trouble of all. The demon makes it seem like the sun barely moves, if at all, and the day is 50 hours long. And then the demon constrains the monk, who should be engaged in holy reading or prayer, to keep looking out the windows and to walk outside his room and to gaze at the sun to see how long it is till lunchtime, and to look this way and that way for some distraction. And then when the monk goes back to reading, he yawns a lot, and he falls easily asleep. And so he rubs his eyes and stretches his arms, and then he stares at the wall for a while. This is from the 4th century, guys. Stares at the wall for a while, and then he wastes his time counting the pages in the book and determining how it's put together, and finds fault with the writing and the design, and finally he just shuts it and uses it as a pillow. You know, I read that and I said, that is either the best description I've ever read of every doctoral dissertation student I've ever known trying to work on their dissertation or on their thesis, and people with spiritual affective disorder. So my guess is if you are experiencing it in any degree, you understand what that 4th century monk, those early church fathers, and me are talking about. And I'm also guessing if you're experiencing it, you're not really caring much one way or another if you find any answers. And yet the good news is, if you're experiencing it, I'm also guessing that somewhere, maybe deep down inside your heart and soul, you know there's still a little voice, a little nudging that's saying, hey, life doesn't have to be this bleak. Life can be better. God calls us to fullness of life. There must be some alternative to feeling this way. And the other piece of good news is there are alternatives. And the next couple weeks, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about a couple of the causes of spiritual affective disorder and some of the things we can do if we can work up the energy to do them, to respond to it. But what I want to leave you with today is a more general suggestion. And I'm going to draw both on what I know as a psychologist about the workings of the body, and also what I know as a spiritual person about the workings of our spirits. And starting with our bodies, one of the things that physicians and scientists know about people with seasonal affective disorder, that depression that comes at this time of year, is that they can be treated in a physical way with something called bright light therapy. A very dear friend of Bob's and mine has pretty profound seasonal affective disorder, and he has a special light that emits special frequencies of light, and he sits under it or near it for about an hour every day, and it causes chemical changes inside the body, hormonal and neurotransmitter changes, and it is very effective for curing the physical form, seasonal affective disorder. And I want to suggest to spiritual people, if we're dealing with the spiritual form of this, that a parallel process might be effective for us, and that would be spending more time in the metaphorical light that still is around us, even if we're having trouble carrying it's there or seeing that it's there, that we might start paying more attention about where there is light in our lives, because there always is. And I was thinking about a meeting I attended Friday afternoon. It's been in the paper, so some of you read about it, you might have seen it on the news. Friday afternoon, there were about 60 people from our community who got together, some from the VA, some from the Homeward Bound, some from the Housing Authority, a number of people from different places, to talk about the problem of homelessness among veterans in this community. At least a fifth of the people, if not more, in Grand Junction and the Grand Valley who are homeless are military veterans. And we were trying to figure out how we could work together to do something about that. And when I ended the meeting, I was thinking, this is just too big a problem. I mean, if these people don't have the resources, I don't know how we can figure this out. But listening to the care and the compassion as people spoke, and listening to that sense of urgency that this is a really important problem that we need to respond to and figure out a way to help with, that was really a piece of light for me. And I think it was a piece of light for some of those vets sitting there, and I think it was a piece of light for a whole lot of us who can see other people in the community who want to work on this. You may not care in particular about homelessness, or maybe you don't care much about veterans, but there are other causes that are important to you. And so I invite you to start looking for light in this community around those causes. Where are people, maybe you, maybe other people, working to make things better and bring light into the darkness of our community? And there's some other ways to do it that aren't quite as hard work, maybe a little less effort. Maybe going back and rereading. A bunch of you have grandchildren, and hopefully some of them are still young enough. They send you the handmade cards for your birthday or some other occasion in your life. You know, dear Meemaw, I hope you have a good birthday, and you've got this wonderful hand-drawn cake and candles. Pull out one of those cards. Or if it's a grown-up friend, just to write some crayons, which some of us are known to do. Reread it, and think about that person who sent it to you, and the light that brings into your life, and maybe even sit down and make a card and send it back to them. You might find light reading the new book that just came in for you from the library. I was visiting Everhart's on Friday, and I didn't realize this. Our library delivers books to our senior communities. People can request what they want, and I know a bunch of you are readers, and so maybe you've been waiting, dying to read that one book from Mesa County Read or something else, and it's just come in. Sit down and pour yourself a cup of tea and forget about doing the laundry and sit with it and enjoy it. And when you finish it, call a friend and schedule lunch and get together and talk about it and how that brings light into your life. If we start paying attention, and it doesn't take that much effort to pay attention, but if we start really paying attention, we'd be astonished at how many patches of light there are in our lives. And every one of those lights can help us if we're struggling with spiritual affective disorder. So this week and the next couple weeks, and actually in the future, I invite you, intentionally look for some places of light in your life, and maybe some places where you can bring some light into somebody else's life. Because that's a really good cure for spiritual affective disorder too. Amen.